Hi, today we'll be talking about stakeholders and benefactors. So I'm pretty sure you've encountered the terms shareholder, stakeholder, and you've probably interchanged the two, thinking they were the same. Hi, but there is a big difference between them, and we'll talk about that today. So first things first, let's talk about who owns a company. There are two types of company, a public and a private company. When you talk about a public company, these are companies that offer shares or stocks to the public market. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to buy a share or a stock from Samsung, you're able to do so because it's a public company. Okay, private companies, on the other hand, are those who have started the business. Okay, and they're the ones usually who manage the business also. So these private companies are usually smaller in size compared to public company. So how does a private company go public? Well, aside from applying to be public, there's also a long, tedious process that you have to go through before a company can declare itself public. Okay? So what we usually call the owners of the companies are not employees, but we call them shareholders. So for both private and public companies, we call the owners shareholders. Okay? So under the shareholder theory, companies are both a free enterprise and a private property. Later we'll discuss what this means. But as the company is owned by shareholders, the business has an obligation to satisfy the demands of its shareholders. Okay, so if you watch any business shows or business TV shows, you would always notice how companies work towards what the interests of the shareholders are. And usually this leans towards profit or good revenue. Okay? So, Milton Friedman's shareholder principle is the business works for the interest of the owners. Okay? So, regardless if it's a private or a public company, your business is moving towards what the owners are interested in. So, is it to grow the company? Is it to make profit? Is it to reach a certain monetary amount? That's what the business works for. Okay? In a public company, the owners are the shareholders. Now, under his principle, you prioritize profit for the shareholders as long as you're able to uphold the rules of society. Okay, so that means that for Milton Friedman, under his shareholder principle, as long as you're able to run the business to, for example, still reach profit for the shareholders, and it still follows the typical law or business law and legal laws within that country, then you are adhering to the shareholder principle. The shareholder view, as owners, the shareholders can ethically and legally dictate what the company can do. So shareholders have power on what the company can do. So they can make big decisions for the company, how the company will move towards a goal or what the goals of the company should be. So shareholders are able to dictate these things. Now, under the shareholder view, the employees or the people working for the business are to um, work towards the goals of what the shareholders see for the company. Okay? And this promotes a sort of utilitarianism because the business owners do what is in best interest of the majority of the shareholders. Okay? Whatever will please the majority of the shareholders, the owners of the company, this is what the business owners try to do. Okay? Business owners are not necessarily the majority shareholders. And when we talk about majority shareholders are those that own a big portion of the company. Okay? So if you're thinking of a pie, they usually own the bigger pieces of the pie. Okay. Now, when we talk about a free enterprise, it's the societal issuance of efficiency and fairness. Okay? So what a free enterprise will tell us that the nature of business is to maximize profit. Okay? And due to competition, the enterprise or the business will naturally operate to be more efficient to gain an advantage. Usually, when you're starting a business or if your business has a lot of competitors in the field, a free enterprise business will usually move towards being more efficient to be able to gain an advantage over the competitors. And because being efficient usually equates to being profitable, this is what businesses try to do. Okay? Now, when we talk about stakeholders, who are stakeholders? Okay? You have two types of stakeholders. You have your internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Now, if you're looking at the diagram here, you would see there on the bottom right, okay, under creditors is shareholders. Okay? Stakeholders are a bigger circle. You can think of shareholders as a small part of what stakeholders are. Okay? And you have two types of stakeholders. You have internal stakeholders, these are your managers, owners, and even the employees, and external stakeholders, suppliers, the society, government, creditors, those who lend money to the company, and even the customers. Now, the shareholders are just a small part or a part of the stakeholders. And stakeholders are any identifiable group or individual who can affect the business in any way, either through the achievement or the organization itself. Does the business itself affect the stakeholder? Okay, these are people who can affect the business and who is also affected by the business. So it goes both ways. It's not just the people who are affected by the business, but it's also who affect the business itself, like employees, managers, owners. Okay, creditors affect the business, but customers are affected by the business and they affect the business themselves. So it's a really a wide range group of people. And under stakeholder theory, what it tells us is that we should value all stakeholders, not just the shareholders of a company. Okay, so you're not just valuing one part. Okay, but you're trying to value the entire circle of stakeholders. Okay, as we've discussed, shareholders are just a part of stakeholders. And the business goals of the stakeholder theory is that the business should run for the benefit of all those involved and affected by the business. So, for example, this means giving back, okay, doing projects that help the community, okay, paying your employees higher, okay, meeting the requests of your creditors. Okay, as long as they're affected by the business, we try as much as possible to work for the benefits of all those involved. Okay, so it means caring for others, giving back to society, paying your taxes correctly, helping out with government projects, okay, helping out with schools. These are the things that companies do to uphold their stakeholders. Okay? And the managers should be aware of how their decisions impact those affected by the business. Okay? So even, especially if you're in the higher up positions, what you do can really affect how the business affects everyone around them. So for example, if you decide to cheap out on waste disposal, you could negatively impact the community surrounding the factory or the business, as we've seen with hotels in Boracay, where they had to close down because the businesses were making decisions that affected the environment of the community. Okay? So even small decisions such as what managers do in the day-to-day operations can have a very negative impact on the community around them. At the same time, let's say if they decide to do a cleanup drive every month, this also affects the community around them. It can either liven up the community, it can positively affect the community, but it can also negatively affect the community. Now, the responsibilities of the business is the ultimate goal is serving the interests of the stakeholders, all of them. You try as much as possible to serve all the interests of your different stakeholders. So the principle of fairness is the driving aspect of the business interactions. Okay? Principle of fairness states that those who are affected by the business should also benefit from the business. So for example, let's say you're Globe or Smart and you're gonna build a tower or a new cell site tower near the homes of indigenous people or the Aitas, the Damagats. Now, because you are intruding and affecting their lives of the community there, the people there should also benefit from it. May it be monetary compensation or some relief help, or you're able to give more jobs for them. In some way, you should be able to give them a benefit from what you're taking away from them. Okay? Now, the difficult part about the responsibilities under stakeholder theory is because the business is affected by so many factors, by so many stakeholders, and there are numerous stakeholders, external and internal to the business, especially if it's a big business. It's very difficult to serve all their interests. Okay, so that's one of the biggest challenges to this theory is serving the interests of all stakeholders can become a daunting or difficult task. Okay, and I think that's why managers really have a heavy responsibility on them to make proper decisions. Okay, so a conclusion, a business needs to care for its stakeholders, but at the same time, you can't forget your shareholders also. Again, shareholders, it's not shareholders versus stakeholders, okay? You're trying to find a good balance between doing what your shareholders want, your business owners, because more often than not, these are the people who invested heavily into your business, okay? And any investment is something that they want to get back, okay? And the shareholders usually help keep the business running. But at the same time, you shouldn't forget the other people affected by your business. Okay, just to make your shareholders happy, you can't just disregard the needs of your employees, the needs of the community that you're affecting, or improper business practices just to make a profit. You have to be able to strike a balance between profiting for your shareholders, but at the same time, giving other stakeholders a chance to benefit from your business also. And that for me is the biggest challenge of the stakeholder theory is to balance out all the responsibilities and all the needs of the different stakeholders. Okay.